The story I want to share with my audience tonight is going to sound like a crime novel or a soap opera, but unfortunately, this is somebody's real life. We're dealing with FBI corruption, the Chinese Communist Party, and the New York Police Department. To go through this information with me is Martha Byrne. Martha, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So just a little bit of background so my audience knows. You are a three-time Emmy award-winning actress. You've starred in As the World Turns, General Hospital. You've written for Bold and Beautiful, several other award-winning shows. You and your family have raised millions and millions of dollars for St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. And now your family finds itself caught up in what some may think of as like a crime podcast or a soap opera. Tell us what is going on with your husband. Give us the background so we understand the gravity of this situation.
Okay, so my husband was on the NYPD starting in, I believe, 1989, and he worked in street crime. He worked in plainclothes units. He was involved in hundreds of cases as an NYPD detective, sergeant. He was a school safety sergeant, which means he was in charge of 40 public schools in the Bronx, protecting children, helping them. And then he was in a severe car accident during a police chase in 2001, where he broke his hip, part of his bones in his neck, and he was forced to retire, which was so upsetting to him. After being on the job for 13 years, he earned 75 medals of honor, including the Combat Cross for bravery for a shooting with a gang member in the Bronx. He was given that by the mayor of New York, and he loved his job. Like, he was so good at it and loved it so much. So to retire was devastating to him. So he used that energy, that brain, all the great things that he's learned as a cop, and became a private investigator and worked for some of the top attorneys in the country on high profile cases. I mean, he probably had 500 cases in his PI business. You know, high profile clients who, if I said their names, you would know, who really looked to him as their go-to PI. And in 2016, he got a typical phone call from a business in Queens, a translation company. They were looking for a private eye to do some background checks, some asset searches on a man in New Jersey. Very, very typical stuff. You know, this is what they do some surveillance. He hired two former NYPD detectives to work with him, who were also PIs, to do surveillance. He spoke to two federal agents who were active at the time about the case. Again, this is just talk. You know, this was normal stuff. He notified the local police of every day of surveillance. He did invoices for everything. He saved every email. He did everything. He did everything and then some. He worked 5 days on this case in 2016 and early 2017, and never thought about it again. And then on October 28th, 2020, the pre-dawn raid at our home, the FBI came here 4 years later and arrested him for failing to register as a foreign agent, because apparently, unbeknownst to him, the people that hired him, the translation company, had been hired by, apparently, someone who was involved in the Chinese government. Now, he was paid by a bank check, and an American bank check. There was nothing about this case that was out of the ordinary. There were no red flags. If there were, he wouldn't do anything illegal. He doesn't do that. He doesn't break the law. So he was scratching his head and like, what is this about? And then he was charged with interstate stalking of this person in New Jersey, which is, again, surveillance is something that PIs do. That's their job.
Yeah.
So arresting a PI for surveillance is like arresting a plumber for changing a pipe. That's like, that's the analogy I say. Like, that's what they do. He was never seen by the subject of a surveillance, which came out at court. Like, he never even saw him. He never left New Jersey. So I don't know whether they're getting interstate stalking. But somehow the DOJ has now criminalized the entire private investigative industry, which, you know, people have to remember, PIs just don't chase cheating husbands. They work for lawyers. They work for the government. My husband's worked on federal cases for the government where he's the investigator. They work for insurance companies. You know, there's news organizations do surveillance for for cases or stories. So, parking on a public street now is considered a federal crime if this verdict sticks. So of course we fought it, right? I mean, he did nothing wrong. He didn't commit a crime. He saved every email, every text message, everything. And when the FBI came to our house, they didn't break down the door. It was actually a very friendly interaction. My husband offered his computers, his guns, his phones, his towel, everything. And they didn't want them. They didn't even go to his home office. We turned in his guns. We did all that. So the whole case seemed very strange. And he spoke freely to the FBI. And when he was interrogated, he was happy to do that. He wanted to figure out what the hell was going on. And of course, they used that against him at trial. They pulled out like a 2-minute clip from a 2-hour interview to make him look guilty. We are now 3 years into this, 3 years of fighting this. And there's never going to be evidence he did anything. He didn't commit any crime. Like, he committed no crime, no crime. There's no crime here, which is absolutely terrifying, that you can take a guy who spent his entire career of service. He's, again, saved hundreds of lives, if not thousands of lives. He's a hero, and use him for your own purpose. And he's the only American arrested. He's the only American involved in this case. And it is shocking that they've, first of all, taken it this far, but that we are still fighting this after everything that they know. And they know he's innocent. They've known he's innocent. And by the way, for their 4-year investigation, the FBI never spoke to the 3 NYPD detectives or the 2 federal agents involved in this case. They never spoke to any of them. But they did speak to the Chinese agents who were the actual criminals in this case many times. So there's a lot about this case that should be concerning to our country, to our citizens, the safety of the FBI never spoke to the local police about this case. I went into the local police after my husband's arrest and said, "Do you realize what's going on in your towns?" They said, "We have no idea." So the FBI, again, this is a failed operation. They did not share intel with private investigators, local law enforcement. And, after 9/11, we learned that by not sharing intel, people got hurt. And the same thing happened here. By not sharing and bringing my husband in as an asset, a lot of bad things happen. And it was the only PI that was charged. And there was another case in New York at the same time frame, where private investigators were going on people's lawns and taking pictures and knocking on doors. And none of those PIs were charged in the Southern District of New York. They were following 12 different Chinese targets or people, and none of them were charged. So why my husband?
Yeah. Do you mind if I ask some questions to try
Of course.
Okay. So is Michael in jail right now?
No, thank God. We had to post $500,000 bail, which is also, they say, well, he did all this for money. He did this for money. He worked for the Chinese government for money. I just want something to be very clear here. In 2016, we had no mortgage. Our house is worth a lot of money. Everybody knows that. You can look it up. We had no debt. We had money in the bank. We obviously had enough money to put bail for his release. So the idea that he would do anything, first of all, betray his country ever for anything. But, the other defendants, the actual people, there was a couple people arrested. They put up $30,000. I mean, they really attacked my husband and used him as the poster child, put his picture in the New York Post, called him a Chinese, bully, he built for the Chinese government. I mean, they used him. They used his image and his face and his background as kind of a gotcha. And Christopher Wray had a press conference that day saying that these people were acting like an organized crime syndicate. And I thought to myself, so let me get this straight. The FBI knew these people were acting like an organized crime syndicate, but didn't warn us, didn't protect us. And according to Richard Grinnell, who's the former director of national intelligence, who I saw in DC last year, we should have been given a defense briefing. We should have been protected and warned. I shudder to think, if something had happened to one of my members of my family or my husband, they knew where we lived. Who do we talk to about that? Like, who looked the other way and decided not to protect us? I find it to be very disturbing.
Yeah. I'm sure that you're aware of, or maybe partially aware, that around 2020 there was a kidnapping attempt on the governor of Michigan. And as they start digging in, the majority of the people who were involved to kidnap her were FBI agents.
Right.
So they go into these organizations and they set people up, and then they end up being a part of the crime, pushing somebody. In your case, it doesn't sound like he was even part of the crime, but they're there, involved, pushing or not giving details, withholding information, and it's like they're setting people up. Do you feel like the FBI knows your husband's innocent, but at this point they
Oh,
can't
sure.
admit it?
Oh, yeah. Of course, 100% they knew. The guy so the man my husband was, who was communicating with my husband, we saw this happen at trial. He was stopped at the airport in April of 2017. There was a video, and the FBI agent, who was the case agent on our case, who never testified, by the way, he's questioning this man. He knows he's involved in something, and he lets him go, and he lets him flee the country. And then the guy comes back, and they speak to him for 2 more days, and they let him flee again. And he's just one of many that they let. So we've pushed entrapment. We've asked for evidence that my husband was not entrapped, and I am not satisfied with the answers that we've been given. If you're allowing, if they're taking the word of a admitted Chinese criminal to spy on us and to have that just cause to infiltrate our lives, I find that suspect. I don't think that's the way things should go. And by the way, the FBI agent lied on the criminal complaint. He lied. He out and out lied. We proved it in court. So as a person who's actually seen the criminal complaint, the world can see it. We think, if they're lying on a criminal complaint, if the FBI agent is a sworn statement in front of the judge, if they're lying on those documents, what are they lying about that we haven't seen? How did they present to the grand jury? You never get to see the grand jury minutes unless there's an officer inspector general investigation, which I hope will be happening on this case. What did they tell the grand jury? There was no evidence that he did anything illegal. So
Yeah.
what did they tell them? You see, they picked the wrong side. They picked the bad guys. When you pick the bad guys, why do you trust them? Every single person in this case, every single one lied except for my husband. The prosecutors lied on day one. They put up evidence trying to put it off as a different date, a picture. They lied to the jury. They told the judge they were going to bring witnesses to prove my husband is an unlawful person. They never did. I have to say, to sit in a courtroom and listen to them lie every single day and trash my husband because they're desperate to win. They will do anything to win. They will suppress evidence. They will do anything to make him look like the bad guy. And I find that to be the opposite of what the justice system is supposed to be. And by the way, we know people who are great agents who've worked in the federal system, former U.S. attorneys who are like, no, if the guy's innocent, we want to get him out of this case because we want to have a stronger case to bring to court. If he's not guilty, it hurts us in the long run. But they wanted to keep him in as this kind of the face of this case, and that is so wrong. They tried so hard to make him look like an unlawful citizen, and they couldn't find anything on him, so they made it up. They literally made it up.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So the other thing is I've got another, I don't know if I can say his name, but he's former FBI. He's coming on my show. He was a whistleblower that testified before Congress about a lot of the corruption within the FBI. And he specifically told me that ever since the Patriot Act after 9/11, that the FBI they're too bloated. They have too many highly educated, special trained agents with nothing to do. They've run out of terrorists. And so what they've done is they've been looking in the United States for people that they can set up and do entrapment, just as you had mentioned earlier. And so he's actually trying to get in with members of Congress to let them know that the FBI is literally desperate. They're like a police officer following somebody until they make a mistake or commit a crime so that they can get them. And I just wonder if something similar is going on with your husband, where, you know, they've done something wrong. This involves the Chinese, and so they need a
Mm.
fall guy. They need a patsy. And it sounds like Michael is the one that they're trying to pin this on, even though it was 5 days of work all the way back in 2016, and he never
Right.
met the people. He never received
No,
Chinese money. So,
no.
so does the whole thing come down to they're saying he should have been registered as a foreign agent, and because he didn't, that he's betrayed his country, or that he needs to go to jail or pay a fine?
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. Listen, the at FARA, the Foreign Agents Registration Act is an administrative task. You do it online. I think it's free, right? You want to tell me who knew what that was in 2016, first of all? And by the way, the FBI says, oh, he should have known it was the Chinese government because the guy was on an Interpol most wanted list for embezzlement and taking bribes. So because his client is Chinese, they want my husband to profile him literally and say it must be the Chinese government. Now, meanwhile, the guy was wanted for stealing money. And guess what? He did steal money. There was a civil lawsuit against that man that was served on his property a few months after my husband's work, that he found LLCs, he found money, he found properties. So the bottom line is, and even in the government's latest response to our motions to dismiss this case and overturn the verdict, and we're still waiting for that, the government says in the reply, okay, I'm paraphrasing, of course, just saying that, maybe he didn't know that was the government, but he was a foreign person. So wait a minute. So now you're not allowed to work with any foreign person. What if they were from Ireland? What if they were from Australia? What if they were, you can't have a conversation with or have a client who's not American now? Like, I don't understand what the rules are. And as you would see, FARA is working for a government. You have to be knowing, you have to know about the law, first of all, and then deliberately not register. Then that's a violation. There's not one piece of evidence that connects my husband to the Chinese government. He was found not guilty on count 1, which was conspiring with the foreign government to violate FARA. So what are we doing here? If they didn't prove that to the jury, then why are we having this conversation? You know, it's a desperate move on their part. And everybody that's looked at this case who was a FARA expert said this is not a FARA case at all. He was not lobbying. He wasn't working for a congressman or anything like that. He was just a guy who got hired by a translation company in Queens who paid him an American bank check, and he did a job that he always does a million times.
Yeah,
So, you know, it's this, but they're using FARA in the China initiative. I don't know if you've talked about this on your show at all, but the China initiative came into play in 2018. And the China initiative was to go after Chinese cases. They wanted to bring them in. And guess what? One of the things that they say to use to open a case on someone is FARA. It's right there online. You say use FARA to open a case. So, but it's just that's not justifiable. It's not a just cause to destroy an innocent man's life. You know, that is so the opposite. Look, if they had brought him in 2017 with the other U.S. law enforcement who were involved in this case, how many crimes would have been prevented? The fact that they didn't bring him in April 2017 and then the subjects were still harassed on other occasions, that's on the FBI. Because my husband would have come in with the other guys that he knows and said, wait a minute, let's help out. Let's make sure we get everybody. But they fled. They fled the country.
wow.
And we couldn't even talk about the civil lawsuit at his trial against the subject. We weren't allowed to bring up my husband's career at the trial. We were not allowed to show his interrogation video at the trial. I mean, if you're being accused,
they blocked you from all of the evidence.
Yes,
that would be helpful.
They wouldn't we're not allowed to present it at all. We couldn't talk about him being a hero cop, couldn't talk about his medals, couldn't talk about his history. Like, if you're being accused of being a traitor for this country and working with the Chinese Communist Party, you should be able to submit any piece of evidence that proves otherwise. You should be able to defend yourself against a horrific accusation like that. And the federal government has all these ways to like suppress evidence, leave it out. The fact we couldn't even talk about the China initiative, we couldn't even say the words at trial. We couldn't ask the subjects about their background, the alleged victims, about their fraud. We were not to bring that up at trial. You know, if you're putting a witness on the stand, but by the way, not one witness was against my husband that one took the stand. Nobody testified against him. Nobody. The only person who was screaming and yelling that he was guilty was the prosecutors. They couldn't put anybody on the stand to say that he did anything wrong. And they were supposed to bring a private investigator, like an expert, to come in and testify, and he backed out last minute. He was from Texas. He backed out. You know why? Because they could not find somebody that would say he did anything wrong. Wow. Isn't that shocking? I mean, it is, I couldn't believe it. I honestly, I could not believe it sitting there. I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs, like, this is wrong. You know, the jurors were falling asleep at times. One time a juror slept for a half an hour. You know, one of them got CCP propaganda put on their door during deliberations. They didn't ask for any readbacks for 3 weeks of a 3-week trial. I don't know if I'll ever get over the abuse that we took in that courtroom. I honestly.
Oh my gosh. And so, but still to this day, they're pursuing this case against your husband.
Yeah, so he was found guilty, and then we immediately found guilty of violating FARA, interstate stalking, and conspiracy to commit interstate stalking. Okay, this is a man who was on the stand who couldn't even identify my husband. He said, they had my husband stand up. He said, do you know who that is? No. No one knows. No one saw him. No one saw the other cops. So we filed a motion to dismiss, to overturn the verdict, or grant a new trial. We have a 137-page motion that we submitted with so much case law and so much evidence that they didn't prove their case. And the government came back and said, well, yeah, that's kind of plain error. They call it plain error when they lie. They try to say, well, you know, that's true. Like, my husband, they had cell phone data knowing that my husband was not at a certain location. They've known this for years. And they still lied about it at trial and told the jury that he was there and put a picture up that they claimed my husband had taken of the subject, which was from 6 months prior. I'm telling you, the lying is this is supposed to be the most highly regarded institution of truth and justice. You know, you teach your children, do the right thing, always tell the truth. And then you have the people who are supposed to be upholding that and being the purveyors of all good and, you know, justice, and they're lying constantly. And, you know, one of the things that really hurt me was the rookie FBI agents who were sitting in the galley, and the freshman U.S. attorneys who were watching this. And one day I came out and I said to them, I'm like, this is not how this is supposed to go. Like, this is not right. Like, if you want to do this for a living, have some integrity and do the right thing. And if you don't see a guilty person, and to just stop it, make it stop. Because if we're teaching these young people that lying is okay, you know, stretching the truth, what is our justice system going to look like for when these young people become higher up in the prosecution space or FBI? You know, I lost it the day when the guilty verdict came out. I absolutely lost it. I don't know how we're going to recover from it. You know, I don't know what that looks like, but we're never giving up until he's exonerated. We'll never stop fighting. He did nothing wrong, but they want to bankrupt you. They want to pressure you, and they pray that you take a plea deal. And he would never do that. Never.
Oh, Martha, I'm so sorry you guys are going through this. This is why I wanted to have you on my show, because
thank you.
I hate hearing about innocent people that are being railroaded, abused, drugged through the mud by organizations that are supposed to protect them and seek the truth. And
Right.
I hate hearing that you and your family are having to go through this.
Thank you.
Is there a website that has more details that I could send or send people towards so that they could learn more about this or support you guys in some way?
That would be fantastic. You can go to Pipe Hitter with an H, Pipe Hitter Foundation.org. And Michael McMahon has his own page. That is an organization, a nonprofit started by Eddie Gallagher, Navy SEAL Chief Eddie Gallagher, who was falsely arrested for murder, ended up in solitary confinement. He was an unbelievable hero, and he got exonerated and started a foundation to help first responders and military, firemen, cops who are falsely accused of these crimes. And they were the first people who reached out to us and believed in us. And I'm telling you, when that phone call came, it felt like the world opened up because you
Yeah.
feel so isolated. This is a wonderful organization. They do incredible work. And they said, we'll be with you until this is over. We're never going away. So they've helped us raise money for our defense. You have to be a millionaire to fight these people. I mean, honestly, you have to have $1 million if you can somehow to even have a shot at fighting these people. And they know that, right? They know that they're going to bankrupt you and take everything from you. And they don't care. They don't care. They don't care because that's how they play. And it's war. So, our lawyers are incredible. They support us and are working with us to finish this job so that we can all hopefully one day sleep in peace and we can get to work. We want to help other people. I've gotten tons of phone calls from people who are going through the same thing. And I've had people contact me who are wonderful, who are walking me through this too, have been there. But it should never be, because my husband should be on the street helping people. I mean, he worked pro bono when he was retired. Like, we didn't need the money per se. Like, we did what we do because we loved to do it. He loved to be a PI. He loved to help people. He's just the best person. He stopped a robbery of an elderly woman at the bank like a few months ago, and he didn't have his guns. He's not armed, but he turned around and saved her life possibly. And that's who he is. So if you take this guy away from us as citizens, we take him away from helping others, we lose. We lose as a community if you take the good guys off the street. This is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to put a link
Thank
down
you.
below. I wish nothing but blessings and a positive
Thank
outcome
you.
on you and your family. I know you guys have raised millions and millions of dollars for children with cancer. It sounds like
Yeah.
after he's exonerated and you guys can take a breath and a vacation and then move on
Yeah.
from this, you guys will be helping other people that are going through the same hell. And so just stay strong. Thank you for coming on and sharing. And I'm going to put that link down below, but thank you again for
Thank
coming
you.
on.
Thank you for having me. We really appreciate it. We need to get the word out, and the support you have no idea how much it means to all of us in our family. So thank you.
Great. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.